Hi, welcome back to Module 4 of your training, covering context of the organization. In this module, we'll interpret Clause 4 of the standard. Context of the organization can be a difficult term to understand, but I think if we use it in an example, it might clarify the term for you. For example, we might say, let's put this in context, meaning, we are discussing a topic, but we need to understand the factors that impact the discussion. We might be talking about a chemical found on site without an SDS, and everyone starts jumping to conclusions. Before going much further, someone might say, let's put this in context. The cleaning company came in with a new cleaning chemical and didn't notify us. We have an effective process for ensuring the SDS is available for the products we bring on site. The issue is with those chemicals that are brought on site by outside contractors. Now we can act appropriately to control outside sources bringing in chemicals. The same holds true for your management system. You must understand the context of your organization. You need to know the internal and external factors, both positive and negative, that impact your organization, products, and services, to assist in making the appropriate plans and decisions for your management system. Otherwise, you might be trying to fit a square into a circle. As stated earlier, many times we find organizations who have purchased a management system framework, for example, templates, and then don't modify those templates to fit their unique organizational requirements. You need to understand your own unique environmental management system requirements and build your system around that. This clause is part of the high-level structure being adopted across all of the ISO standards as they are updated. Consequently, the clause language and interpretation is or will be similar across all of the revised ISO standards. The environmental conditions and context will likely be an input to your risk assessment. Understanding your unique conditions and issues will likely be prioritized within the risk assessment process to determine what the key issues are that need to be managed and controlled. It is good to receive input from the various functions within your organization, as each will have a different perspective. When we conduct our audits, we will be looking for evidence that you have reviewed your internal and external issues and conditions. This process should be planned to ensure there is a periodic review for changes that could impact the results. It is not required that this process or results be documented, but from a practical standpoint, it seems that documenting the conditions and discussion will make it easier for implementation and follow-up assessment of gaps and changing conditions that need to be considered. Changing conditions and issues that factor into your context need to be considered as an input to your management review meeting. Consequently, the issues and changes to the issues discussed in your management review will be confirmed during your audit through discussions and management review documentation. 4.2 covers understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Your company needs to determine who the interested parties are that are relevant to your environmental management system. It is important for you to understand their needs and expectations, so this can be taken into account in managing your system. Additionally, you need to understand their needs and expectations to determine if you have compliance obligations that must be addressed. There could be changes in who the interested parties are and what their expectations are, so this must be monitored and reviewed on an ongoing basis. This clause is part of the high-level structure being adopted across all of the ISO standards as they are updated. Consequently, the clause language and interpretation is or will be similar across all of the revised ISO standards. In the new revision, the standard expands the scope of who you need to consider when developing and managing your management system. Previously, you likely considered regulatory agencies, for example, the EPA, if you are a U.S. organization, your employees, and neighbors if your practices could impact the outside environment. Now you will consider other interested parties who have an interest in your environmental management system. In addition to the previously defined interested parties, this could include your transportation partners, your financial partners, industry partners, subcontractors, suppliers, stockholders, competitors, downstream parties impacted by your activities, and products as they pass through to the final user and end of life, and anyone else who is relevant to your environmental management system. Once these parties are identified, additionally identify their expectations and needs related to your environmental management system. And as stated earlier, you will periodically assess the interested parties for changing parties and needs. Let's go through a quick example. Considering the product you produce and deliver, some of your interested parties could be your insurance company, who cares about your compliance from a risk standpoint, your neighbors, if there is a risk of you polluting the air, ground, or water, and your end user if your product is difficult to dispose of responsibly, and landfill if that is where your product ends up after end of life, if there are hazardous components within your products, and your board of directors if you have an event that could lead to negative publicity, impacting your public image, and more. Although there is not a documentation requirement, your company must provide enough evidence for your auditor to gain confidence that you have considered the potential interested parties and their needs. By documenting a procedure and/or documenting the outcomes, for example, who the interested parties are and what their expectations are, it will make an effective tool for assessing changing interested parties and requirements, and also uncover potential gaps in identifying interested parties or their expectations. As with the requirements of 4.1, when we audit your organization, we will expect to see the linkage between the requirements of the interested parties, the context of the organization, the scope statement, the risk assessment, and the defined objectives. Additionally, we would expect to see the requirements of the interested parties and their changing needs incorporated into the management review meeting discussion. 4.3 covers determining the scope of the environmental management system. You need to identify and document the scope statement for your management system. When creating the scope statement, you need to consider the internal and external issues, as we discussed in the context of your organization, your environmental compliance obligations, your company's functions and physical boundaries within your operation, your activities and products or services that you produce and offer, and your ability to control or influence the impacts on the environment. Once you determine what the scope is, you need to ensure all of the activities, products, and services are incorporated into your management system. The scope statement needs to be documented and available to interested parties who seek access to the statement. This standard does not allow for exclusions to be applied as the ISO 9001 allows. This clause is part of the high-level structure being adopted across all of the ISO standards as they are updated. Consequently, the clause language and interpretation is or will be similar across all of the revised ISO standards. The previous version of the standard required companies to create a scope statement that identifies the boundaries of the management system. The new version has the same requirements for describing the boundaries. The difference is that the new standard identifies specific requirements that must be considered when identifying your scope statement. As auditors, we will review your scope statement to ensure it accurately encompasses your company context, your compliance obligations, your processes and physical boundaries, and your products and services, taking into account your ability to control and/or influence the environmental conditions and impacts. 4-4 covers environmental management system and its processes. The standard expects your management system to enable you to achieve the intended outcomes, including improved environmental performance and compliance to the legal and other requirements. These will be achieved by implementing and improving your environmental management system on an ongoing basis. You need to consider the required knowledge for your management system and ensure you maintain that knowledge base. This clause is part of the high-level structure being adopted across all of the ISO standards as they are updated. Consequently, the clause language and interpretation is or will be similar across all of the revised ISO standards. This concludes Module 4, covering context of your organization. In the next module, Module 5, we will cover leadership. Thanks and have a great day!